Hey, we're live. So wonderful. Here we are. I am Angela Young-Smucker. I'm the executive director of Third Coast Baroque, and I'm very excited to have my guest today, Rubén Dubrovsky, who is my co-founder and the artistic director of Third Coast Baroque. If you are not familiar with Third Coast Baroque, we are a performing ensemble in Chicago, Illinois. And our mission is to share the aesthetic of Baroque music while unlocking its relevance for today's audiences. And we'll talk about what that means a little more, probably in this broadcast and later on. But I'm really looking forward to getting into that today. So I see we've got some people already joining us. Oh, hi, Mary. Thanks for logging in. Oh, thanks so much. So today is episode 1 of Meet the Artist, and this is our TCB Tuesday live stream where we are going with the hashtag at home together, since we're all at home, but really staying connected. So as I said, my first guest today is Rubén Dubrovsky, and he is based in Vienna. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his origin story. So, Rubén, to get us started, can you tell us how you first got into music?
Oh, hello, everyone.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Sorry, my bad. There we go.
Well, music, like I guess it happens with every musicians or most of us, is being there since the very beginning of my life. In my case, my parents are, for them, is music always is and was very important. My mother is a pianist. My father, even if he's not a practicing musician, he is really a music lover. And I was, of course, with a piano at home and with instruments around since the very beginning. But as I would say, typically a musician's child, at the beginning I was like playing around with the instrument and of course singing like everyone does. But piano wasn't really my instrument. And it took a long time until I actually knew what was going to be. Of course, I gave the piano some try, but no, it wasn't. I mean, I didn't know it was the piano. What is it? But at the same time that I was like playing little things on the piano, I was listening very intensively to Argentinian and South American traditional music, because that's something that my father always loved very much. And that was, these recordings were very much at home. And also this music in the 70s was a music that since our political systems at the time were dictatorships, traditional music was always like a mean to transport also political contents of protest. And since that was like what my family was feeling, this music was home. So what happened is that I was musically doing all kinds of things, and at school and in the choir and playing some percussion and some flute and everything and nothing seriously. But in a moment, my parents gave me as a gift for my birthday, I think I was 11, my first own instrument. That's a stringed instrument, and I was always very much attracted by it. The name of it is charango, and it's a little South American guitar. And it was like some magical idea they had that this instrument is something that I could enjoy playing. And it was immediately like that I got the instrument, and then like yes, for weeks I did nothing else than playing this instrument by myself, and that was it. I was clearly a strings player, and charango was the beginning of a long series of string instruments since.
Could you give us a little demonstration of this instrument, my friend?
Actually, yes, because I
Oh,
wanted really you to see. This
oh,
is a charango,
there we go.
and the I put it close that if you can see, you will
Mhm.
see 5 double courses of strings. And the interesting thing about this is that later, this fact of the 5 double courses would get a very important meaning in my future musical life. But yes, I will tell you more later. Let me stand up.
Mhm.
A little more room.
Excellent.
So the strings, if I play them, what would be normally from low to high in a guitar, the strings are sound like this. Which you can see it is not from low to high. If I want to play from low to high, I have to go do this. Start in the middle, then go up, then here, then here, and then here. And why is that? Because this is actually a Baroque instrument that survived. And the way of tuning like this, it has a big advantage for a strumming instrument like this, because you don't want to go from high to low or from low to high, but to have a rather equal range. So when you start, you have this kind of yes, of smooth sound. You can be very rhythmical. And it's a beautiful instrument to play melodies in thirds, because we have so many thirds already in the tuning. We have this, we have this third, we have this third. So
Wonderful. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. This is super great. Um, yeah, I can't play a stringed instrument to save my life. I think I got a C in guitar in college, so I'm amazed at anybody who can play the guitar.
I'm amazed by
Oh,
anybody who can play a keyboard or who can sing. So for me, this is just to play a stringed instrument became really second nature.
that's
And of
excellent.
course, when you start playing folk music, the first thing that happens is that you not only play one instrument, but then you learn to play the normal classical guitar, then the mandolin, then different sizes of charangos, and I was doing this music really for a long time. But my mother wisely said, okay, but you are obviously a musician, you want to do music, choose like a proper instrument. And
Oh my God.
it was good that she gave me that impulse, because this was just being very easy, but I didn't really know, okay, if I want to be a musician, what should be my instrument like for life? And um, really, by case, I was first very confused because I didn't know so much about instruments. And first I thought, okay, flute or violin, just because I had a recording of Bach trio sonatas with flute and violin, and I loved that recording, so say maybe it is that. And only by case, I went with my mother to see a movie, which is a wonderful movie, or at least I thought so when I saw it that time. And this is the American violin player Isaac Stern in a trip to China in those days. Yes, and this must have been end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. So the movie's name, at least in Spanish, the translation was From Mao to Mozart, and I imagine probably it is even the original title. At the end of that movie, where Isaac Stern is performing and teaching young Chinese people, there was really in the closing credits almost a young cellist, really a boy, I don't know, he was 8 or something like that, playing wonderfully the cello. I made eyes like this and I said, oh, I want to play that one. Yes. And that was it. By case, we had in Buenos Aires a close friend from my parents who was a cellist, and that was the beginning of my second life as a musician.
Great. So you started playing the cello in Argentina, but how did you get to Vienna?
Oh, that was still a long way. I started playing cello actually very, very late. I was already 15, which is a normal age in Argentina for many people to start instruments. People start super late. We don't have this kind of music schools network like you have here in Vienna. That here it breaks my heart when they say to a kid who is 7 or 8 years old that he's already too old to start with violin. I say, my God, yes. And of course, when you start and you are older, you know what you are doing and why. So you have some kind of motivation that I didn't really needed my parents to remind me of, that I had to practice. I mean, I needed my teachers to remind me, but
we won't tell.
Yes, and cello and the traditional music, they were really like both in parallel in my life for some years. I started playing in a very good, very important traditional music, folk music group in Argentina called Yachta y Manta. And I started there again without knowing what would expect me. The guys were all of them older than me. They were all studying in university and I was 15. And the interesting thing, again, I mentioned before, like the charango had something special which would become important later in my life. And that fact is that the instrument has Baroque origins. A charango is a folk music version of a Baroque guitar.
Right, and this is a question that some of our friends had for you. Was this the first time that you made that connection between Latin American music and Baroque music?
Well, consciously, that happened much later, as I was already studying in Germany. At the beginning, they were really like two parallel worlds. The classical music, I started playing the cello and playing, Beethoven, and then, you know, all the concertos you play as a young cellist and all these etudes, and of course some Bach, but of a scene still that time on a modern instrument in what we would call now a romantic way of playing it, because that was how my teacher did it in that time. And the folk music was there in my life, very present. And it wasn't until much later that I realized how much connection was there. But during that experience in this traditional music group, something very interesting was learned to me. And this is when I was practicing by myself. I never had a charango teacher. I was practicing, listening to recordings and trying to recreate that. And I did it quite well. I was a believable charango player. I was very nervous when I was going to meet some real pro the first time, because I didn't know if the way I was doing it, I have never seen a charango player from close. I was just playing by myself. This is how it sounds, looking for the position, looking for a technique which works. So I was relieved when I saw, okay, this is actually how more or less the way people do it. And when I came into the folk music group, because they were looking for a charango player, what happened very soon is that, again, from recordings, the group was trying to recreate the sound not only of one or two famous charango players like it was what I was doing, but trying to recreate the particular sound of different particular regions and even particular specific villages in Argentina, in Bolivia, in Peru. So it was some kind of not considering your interpretation important or someone's interpretation, but really trying to get a sound, the flavor of the way that those people do it, which in a way, it is somehow similar to that what we do when we perform Baroque music or music from older times. You get some sources, some manuscripts, some editions, and you try to recreate the sound of Bach, the sound of Handel, the sound of Mozart. Of course, with your own ideas, and everyone does his own recreation, and we know exactly that it is an unfulfillable dream to try to play like Bach. We don't know how it is, but the intention is, before you say this is the way I mean it, at least when you're learning the style, is okay, how does this style goes? Which are the rules? Yes. So in this case, I learned to play a particular rhythm in the style of Argentina, the style of Bolivia, the style of Peru. So learning that my musical intention or my musical personality was not only based in what I like, but it was also very important to have a lot of information to develop actually your taste, to develop your knowledge, your possibility of choosing flavors, choosing the right instrumentation for a song, the right tempo, even the right attitude, because some of this music is played by a soloist with some accompaniment. Some of this is played by a group of equally important different instruments. And most of this music is like, it would be choral music, but for wind sections, where everybody in a town, literally, is playing pan flutes. And they play all together as a band, and they go in procession.
So wait, they're playing pan flutes, like the row of little.
Exactly.
Okay.
In a very special South American way, which was there before the Spanish. Because when you say a row of flutes and you think of this pan flute, well, the way in the Andes actually happens is not like this. It is like this. So you have two pan flutes which alternate the notes, but you only get to play one of them, and your neighbor is going to play the other notes. So I play the C, you play the D, I play the E, you play the F. So a melody goes ta, 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 ta. And this not only by two guys, but by 20 or 40. And then in octave or in parallel fourth or fifth, and the sound is amazing, and the feeling of make music together is amazing, because in that case, literally, nobody can make music by yourself because you only have half of the notes of the tune.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. See, I've seen pan flutes at the airport. That's where I see them. Okay. So, um, so I had no idea they were so intricate. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So then
from there, of course, my cello teacher at a certain moment told me, it's all good with this folk music, but if you want to become a professional cellist, you better let all your other obligations wait a little bit, because I still had to finish my high school. And you really commit to cello playing. And I did that. And I was very soon playing in orchestras, youth orchestras, and doing chamber music. I had a string trio, then a string quartet. And I thought string quartet playing was going to be my life, because I loved it. And it was a great period of my life. And there is something you ask, how was the way to Vienna? Actually, the way was over Germany. In the DNA of any South American musician, or most of us, you know somehow that if you want to become a professional, it is not a bad idea to go to study abroad. Because the level is so much higher in Europe or in the US, that if you want to really be, not only to get a good teacher, because there are some very good teachers actually there, but to be in an ambience when you are not one of the better ones, but one of the beginners, yes, it is very stimulating. And that's what I did. And I basically took through one of these youth orchestras. In this case was the Jeunesse Musicale World Orchestra. I sent a tape, a cassette.
Little cassette tape.
The one, exactly. That's the one you turn with. Yeah.
That's when you have to get your pencil and wind it up.
Exactly. I sent my cassette, and I had the luck to be taken for that World Orchestra, which was happening in Berlin. So I took that plane. I played in the orchestra, but then went to Detmold, to that university in Germany, to play for one teacher that I had already had contact with. And he told me, oh yes, do the audition. I did it. And that was the beginning of my European life.
Okay. So about how old were you in this orchestra now?
Now, I was exactly 21.
21, okay.
And then I was in this beautiful little town called Detmold, which had at the moment, I don't know how it is now, it was the second largest music university in Germany.
Oh, wow.
In a tiny, tiny little town. It had 2 pizzerias. That was it. Yes. So 2 ice shops, and everything was like 2 of them.
Excellent. So it's your typical college town.
Yes. So, and you know that if you go to the pizzeria, the risk is very high that your teacher will be sitting there and ask you, why aren't you practicing?
Oh, God. You get it to go. You go in the practice room. Fine. But okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You're 21. You're playing in this orchestra. What happens next?
In fast forward, the most important thing that happened there, yes, is that in this library, remember, internet wasn't born even yet. It was just the beginnings. I'm speaking of the year, what was it? 80, of 90, of the beginning of the 90s. So they had this amazing library, all these recordings that you could go there. And they even have CDs that were just appearing. That was
Ooh,
amazing.
fancy.
So what happened there is that I started listening to music. So I was playing Bach, still in a very romantic way, but there you heard these people doing some, we call it today, historically informed performance. So I heard some Brandenburg concertos, and you hear the cellist playing the bass line. I was totally happy about the way that they were playing, but that has very little to do with what I was doing, playing these Bach cello suites. And really seeing it quickly, that was the beginning of a new world for me. There were two artists I was especially enthusiastic about. One of them it was Christophe Coin. He's a wonderful, wonderful French cellist, but with a very strong activity in Vienna too. I remember his Vivaldi and Haydn early recordings with the Academy of Ancient Music, Christopher Hogwood. They were wonderful. And the other one was Emma Kirkby, who was the wonderful English soprano. And I remember her Jauchzet Gott from Bach with John Eliot Gardiner, really also from the 80s. Wow, that was for me a Bach with swing.
Yeah, and so what about these kinds of recordings? What was something that really struck you that was different than what you were practicing before, what you were hearing before, what you were performing before? Was there something that really jumped out at you as you listened?
I didn't realize yet at the moment what was it. Looking it back from today is because it felt exactly like I was playing my traditional music. And that is the moment you were asking me before, where both things like come together.
Right.
And at that moment, I felt, you know, I might be seeing this through my Argentinian eyeglasses. Like probably I must be wrong. This rhythm they are playing feels exactly like this rhythm we play at home, but it's probably I am just looking at it in a superficial way.
Right.
It took a lot of time until I got the courage to understand this, and this happened with some, for me, in some very strong moments. Things are not always in a, they don't develop in a line. Sometimes you have jumps in your consciousness. One of them, when I was already wanting to learn to play this music, and then I was already in Vienna. I finished my high school. Agnes, my wife, and me, we established in Vienna. I wanted to know a little more about Baroque guitar. So I went to meet two wonderful Baroque guitar players after a concert, because I wanted them to show me how does it go. And I brought my little charango with me, and I say, okay, I'm Rubén, I play this charango. Can you show me how to play Baroque guitar? And they were wonderful, very humble and very nice. And they let me play a little bit. And at the end, what actually happened is that I was showing them the tricks from South America, because many of them, they are still alive from very ancient times. And the old sources, the manuscripts you have from from the Baroque times, they were not describing everything you need. They were only describing what people from their time needed to know how something goes. They weren't written for us, so there was lots of information missing. So I realized, like, okay, of course I have a lot of things to learn, but exactly the way I was learning the charango, the Baroque guitar, or later today, the colacione, this double bass lute I love to play, is again this trusting that the instrument is going to be your best teacher. If you hear to what the instrument needs and the way it wants to be played, it will tell you a lot about the way it wants to sound. So this approach of trusting my natural connection with an instrument gave me a lot of courage to do today what I do, and was basically the same when I became later a conductor, just trusting my connection with the instruments or with the group, that knowing it will work if I connect.
So now we're thinking about you as a conductor. So how did this begin? We do have a question about how the Bach Consort in Vienna began, which you co-founded as well before you got over to Chicago a few years back. So can you tell us just briefly how you made that jump to conductor and then started your own group over in Vienna?
Well, the beginning of the Bach Consort was still a chamber music group, and together with Agnes and together with two other great musicians. And we wanted, Agnes and I, who had played modern piano trio before, also she was much more into Baroque music. So we wanted to create a Baroque chamber music group. And this was for years. I was playing cello there. And what happened is that mostly through the several groups I had, if it was the string quartet or if it was then some other chamber music group, and also in the Bach Consort, more than playing cello, I was very interested in about studying the score and knowing how to rehearse. And sometimes I took kind of natural leading of the rehearsals. When you are 4 people, everything is still, of course, very democratic, but then it got bigger. We had then some singers and some more guest instrumentalists, and still from the cello, there was a time we decided it was okay, or it was smart if I officially lead the rehearsals, still with a lot of democratic intervention of my colleagues, especially from the other founders. But it was a slow process there. So I realized myself that I loved playing cello in this group because of the basso continuo function. Continuo is giving the pulse, is giving like the basic rhythmical frame, giving the structure, giving time for people to breathe, and organizing the music. And that was actually what I loved, much more than playing a nice tune on the cello. I wasn't that interested about that. So at that point, I realized, right, I really want to conduct, but I thought, no, conductors, that's something very, very different. I am not that. To be a conductor, you must be able to sit on the piano and to read the Rosenkavalier from the score sight reading. That's a conductor. And I still have a lot of respect to people who are able to do that. But I thought that's the kind of brain you need. And I was, and I realized later, or I realized as soon as I started conducting, that my connection to scores and my connection to music, to my own musicality, was much stronger when I got rid of the instrument. And of course, at the beginning, conducting is kind of a trauma. Where is my instrument? What do I do with my hands? But very quickly, practically from the beginning, I felt at home at the conducting podium.
Yeah. So when was the first time you stepped on that podium as officially in the conductor mode?
It was in the year 2006, 2007. Again, now conducting a youth orchestra with a dance group. And it was very interesting because it wasn't with a Baroque program at all. We did Stravinsky, we did Shostakovich.
Easy stuff.
Yes. Well, And I, as a cellist, I had played all these composers. We did some Mendelssohn, then some Arvo Pärt, and I was familiar with the language. But of course, conducting this was challenging, and still I felt very much at home.
Wonderful.
So what happened is that almost by case, I was already with the Bach Consort. We were giving very important concerts at the Vienna Musikverein, and I was officially then the artistic director of the group, but still from the cello. But I got hired for doing an opera that you, Angie, know very well, which is Orlando Furioso by Vivaldi. That's yours.
Okay. We'll save that for another conversation.
For sure. Yes. So basically, what happened is that I got that job in a very miraculous way. And that was 2008, and it is now the 12 years of conducting opera. And
I mean, that seems still very recent, you know, and at least to me. But you had essentially been in this sort of leadership guidance conducting role within your own chamber music making since, I mean, the Bach Consort started in 1999, correct?
Right.
So it's been around for over 2 decades now. Congratulations. How does that feel? How does that feel to have an ensemble that's had such a long established presence?
I don't realize it at all. For me, it feels as young, as fresh as also Third Coast Baroque, where we say, oh, it's already our 4th season. We are planning 5th season. What is it?
Yeah.
And yes, time flies, and I don't feel the age of the group at all. What I do feel, what I'm thankful for, is that with the ensemble, through all these years and through the connection with all these wonderful players, we develop kind of an own language, a way of doing music, which of course is being refreshed every time with every new piece we take, and when every new player that comes in or soloist that comes in brings a new energy and new ideas. But yes, the only thing I feel is that I go into a Bach concert rehearsal, and even if some of the musicians are new again, but I know them, they know me, and they know what I want, and the process is very, very easy. So that's something the part I really enjoy very much.
And well, so speaking of rehearsals, we've had questions come from some of our friends here about how do you approach rehearsing a group? I'm sure, as you mentioned, with the Bach Consort, you've been together so long, you know, you sort of had a base understanding of how things will go. But let's say, for instance, you go into a new opera house, or we had just started with Third Coast Baroque, and these are people you had not worked with before. How do you go into those kinds of situations?
Wow, it's a good question.
So let me rephrase it just a little bit. So I would say, regardless of the history with the musicians, what would you say is your top priority in that first rehearsal?
Yes, I believe very much in musicians that must feel well connected to each other, well with themselves, and free in order to make good music. And that seems obvious to me. It isn't obvious for many colleagues who say they don't care so much if the tuba player feels well or not, as long as he delivers what he has to. Which I acknowledge that. I'm not like that. I really, for me, it's very important that musicians can open, that they can feel safe, that they can connect to each other, and of course to me, because it's all this network, and that we can, from this, really looking openly to what do we have in potential, in possibilities, in in different ways of playing what is there, and to see that with love and respect. And from there, you go, and sometimes you need a lot of time for some basic work. Sometimes there is such a quick agreement that you can go more into the actual music you are trying to put together.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I think in that first rehearsal, and ideally in every rehearsal, I think very much, I want to feel well when I do music, and I think everybody has the right to feel well in a rehearsal, to feel respected as a musician, as a person, of course, and trying to see, okay, what do we have on the table? What do we have? Which kind of musicians? Which kind of, is there a common agreement on certain things?
Mm-hmm.
On the way we treat rhythm, balance, intonation, phrasing, sound,
Mm-hmm.
language, expression, and then you go, but looking for a common agreement, as basic as it sometimes has to be, in order from there be able to grow quickly together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, speaking of Third Coast Baroque, something I enjoy very much, that I have the feeling from the very beginning we had the possibility to grow into a close group, because it's all wonderful musicians and people who are very open and very interested about knowing new ideas. And that's something that feels very, very good, because then you have no limits, only the limit of how much time do we have to develop more and more.
Right. Well, and as a, coming from the musician's point of view, when I know that the person up front has a clear idea of what they want from the music, and they are able to communicate that well without talking down to anybody, and when they put out that kind of energy like that, where it's understood and it's demonstrated that the person who is on the podium trusts those artists that are in front of him or her, and trusts them to really go with this collaborative vision. I think that just helps set the stage for success. So we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to do some rapid fire here. We're going to switch gears. But please know, and first of all, thank you to everybody who's watching right now. This is super great. I see so many familiar faces. I see John Sagos, who is our Third Coast Baroque Board president. Hey, how you doing? Rubén Dubrovsky, I can't pronounce his last name.
Georg Pichel, hello Georg, that's right.
Yes, he's been watching. Jerry Fuller, who else is here? And Martin is also here. Anna Steinhoff, our dear cellist, James Clark, one of our board members. Sandro Santander, is this one of our friends? Yes, okay, excellent.
Musician from Argentina, he lives in Vienna.
Yes, well, hello, Sandro. Thank you all for joining us today. So with just the couple minutes that we have left, I want to ask you about what's going on now. So almost the entire world has been ordered to stay at home. So how have you been affected by this current pandemic, and what has your life been like in the last month or so?
Well, let's start with the positive.
Okay.
I've been, for years, we had a running gag home saying, I'm going to take a sabbatical year. When am I going to do this? And I was telling to my people, next year, I think I'm not having so many gigs anyway. This is going to be my sabbatical. And then the year got full, so okay, next year.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't exactly expect the sabbatical to happen in this way.
Yeah.
But speaking of the positive, I am really enjoying being home, because I've been so much on the road, and I've before this happened, I had been already 3 months being around, and it would have been more 3 months with almost no days home. So that is very beautiful to have the chance again to touch ground and to be home, to be close to the family, to take instruments again in my hand, which
well, and as you know, as somebody who also travels a lot, how is your spouse handling this? I know our routine is completely different now. I see my husband every day, and I was like, oh, well, it's really nice. Like, we get to have coffee in the morning. It's fantastic. Yes. So has Agnes been adjusting to you being there all the time?
Well, it is really at the beginning a challenge that you have to learn also that yes, everyone needs also a little bit of time for himself or herself during the day. But no, it's working wonderfully, and yes, it is important to again to connect and to see what is this, because it's not only the fact of being home. Speaking about the not so positive side, of course, I feel a lot of responsibility as the artistic direction of 3 organizations, which is beside Third Coast Baroque and the Bach Consort, also the Bach Collegium in München. We had yesterday, we would have had our Matthew Passion, which was cancelled.
Yeah.
So, and of course, they are with a lot of colleagues, singers, instrumentalists, and all the staff who have been working so hard for it. So in this supporting each other, I'm sure for you and your husband and for everyone else watching is the same. We have to support each other, because sometimes one of us or the other one is overtaken by worries, by fears. But when will this be over, and how will the world look like when it is over? And that is something I think very important for everyone, but especially for us musicians, especially for freelancers. I mean, I say freelancer, and I think of the Metropolitan that also sent everybody home. So even having a stable job isn't as safe as people have told.
I've even seen people over here say they've had contracts canceled for summer of 2021. As far out as that, and so it's a very, everything is very uncertain right now. So is you know, how do you approach that in terms of things that are still on your calendar? You know, we're still planning to mount next season as planned, which I hope we'll be announcing very soon. But how do you go about working on music if you're not sure that it's going to happen?
For me personally, I take the approach, I learn the stuff, you know, without gambling, without thinking, oh, it will probably not be done, I just leave it. I learn all the scores, which is sometimes a lot of work. I am now working on Don Giovanni, which I love, and I have Leonard Bernstein Mass also on the desk. And I think we have to keep working for ourselves, for our own spirit, and for our own development. And every upcoming concert production, even if it's not happening, is the possibility of getting connected with this music, and through that with your own musicality. So I think that being keeping yourself busy with this, that's not a mistake. Of course, the problem is more than that for me, trying to guess and to lead the organizations in an intelligent way that gives everyone that I can deal with a little a better future, that if we don't do that. I think that's very important, because I mean, this virus is like, okay, like the weather. You cannot really change it. You can have to work until the storm is over. But the reaction of those people who are in charge of the society, but also of the cultural institutions, the theaters, the promoters. That reaction is not the weather. And I think it's very important that we talk about that. Because if you tell to your musicians, okay, don't worry, this is being canceled, but as soon as we can, we will reprogram this. Or even as you have done as an executive director, you pay the musicians who couldn't do this concert that we had to cancel. You pay already half of the fee because you know they have to pay some bills. I think that's a response that gives people the possibility to live today and some perspective. But very often happens that you are not being told how does it look, and you are not even allowed to talk. And I've spoken with colleagues that feel that if we start talking about that or doing pressure to people, would you please consider in your future programming the fact that we have been working for weeks and months for you, and then the concert didn't happen, and we didn't get paid. People feel afraid of being labeled as difficult and then not being asked. So I think the dialogue is very important. The connection between artists, between themselves, between the people supporting arts, between those people who are in boards of directors, people who are in institutions that hire musicians. It is very important, the dialogue, because people who have fired an orchestra 2 days after this without talking to anyone, how are they going to see those musicians in the eyes again when everything is over? How is this going to happen? So there is so much damage that we can do, in more than about, I'm not speaking about money now, we all needs to know how will this be, but I'm speaking about the network. And I think it's very important that we create an atmosphere where not everyone has to fight for his own future and his family, but that we really can connect and see what is going to be the role of culture in this society after the virus, and how will we do the reconstruction, which will be necessary, of course, because there will be less money, there will be money, culture will be taken for some people as a luxury that we cannot afford now, etc. So we really need to be very open in the person.
Well, and so that leads me to my next question is, so what do you think are the long-term effects of these stay-at-home orders on the performance side of this situation? We see a lot of people making music at home, doing some virtual music making. I know that we've got some things in the hopper that we're working on similar to that, but how do you think, once this is over and we're back in the concert halls, what do you think would be something positive that could come out of this, and something that might be detrimental to live performance? What do you think?
Personally, I think that through this we all see how important is the live contact among people, just to be able to talk physically face to face to someone, to be close to someone, and to make also music and to experience people live. So I think that everything which is happening in terms of streaming, in terms of people performing something and hope and sharing it, I think that's wonderful, but I don't think that that's the future of music. I think that's great that people keep active and keep themselves busy and improving. Okay, how do I use this musical editing program to do something? Because already if you play something that you want to share with someone, you want to do it as good as you can. And that keeps everyone doing this fit for coming back. And I think it's great that through this that we keep contact among musicians, with our audience, with people supporting arts. That's all good.
Do you find, well, let me ask you this. Are you able to make music at home right now? Is it, I know it's difficult
Yeah.
for some it's not.
To make music for me when I am at home typically is to read scores.
Mm-hmm.
That's my work home, and yes, I am able.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not as much as I would like to, because I still didn't get very much tranquility since I am here, and this is several weeks already.
Mm-hmm.
I am busy all day with different things, and but yes, um, I do read and prepare my scores.
Mm-hmm.
I program concerts, which takes a lot of time, because for choosing a program, sometimes there are days and days and days of reading music until you have that program. And I did have the luxury of retaking some cello playing and some of my guitars,
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoy that, taking the colazione again. But that's for me more almost like a little, instead of playing games, I take an instrument. But for me, it's not that I would now think, okay, let's do the Matthew Passion that we have missed virtually, and everybody plays their voice for
Mm-hmm.
home. I think that we have already so many wonderful recordings in audio and in video of so many good music, and these recordings were done so that we can listen to them when there is not live music. So let's enjoy them. If the recordings are from last year or from 100 years ago, there is so much heritage. It's like these wonderful libraries. And I think, yes, I do hear to a lot of recordings now that I didn't have time before. I enjoy that very much, and enjoy that honestly more than listening to yet another playing with myself at home video. Even if sometimes it's hilarious, it's funny, I love it, but I don't think that's the future of art.
Well, so speaking of recordings, we have to kind of wrap up today, but I noted that you had a recommendation of a recording for our friends who are watching, and it is a piece that we did. What was it? I've lost it. I've lost it. I've
Well,
lost it.
let me help you. We had
Oh,
a wonderful program. We had a Vivaldi program
yes,
with our friend Vivica Genot.
yes.
And I didn't choose a piece with Vivica because that I think is almost worth to keep it for a special where I hope we can have a Vivica also as a guest. But there is a Vivaldi concerto for strings that we enjoyed very much playing. It has been recorded for WFMT, and I think it's very nice if we can share that with our people as a saying thank you for watching, thank you for supporting us, and yes, and that we keep people and arts and culture healthy.
So, in that video, you are playing the colazione, which you mentioned before. Can you just tell me in one sentence what makes that instrument so special? Why do you love it so much?
Well, I was telling you before about the basso continuo function of an instrument, not playing the tune, but playing the bass. Well, the colazione, you would never come to the idea to want to play a tune with this. It is like a bass guitar, like everybody knows, an electric bass, but just unplugged. It's exactly that same tuning, same job in the group, and it is fun to play. You can lead from that instrument, you can accompany, you can groove, and yes, it's my favorite instrument right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, I
Maybe,
think we're gonna. What's that?
no, maybe we do a colazione special next
Yes,
time.
absolutely. Well, we're gonna have to stop there today. Thank you so much for doing this, Rubén. This was really fun. and I hope everybody watching enjoyed this conversation. I think we'll definitely have continue with you because we've got more questions that that came in. So we will definitely to be continued. How about that? We'll do a part 2. Excellent. Wonderful. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you want more information about us, you can go to thirdcoastbaroque.org or visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. This video will be posted everywhere we can. And until then, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.